Good evening and welcome to Techdenkers. I see some familiar faces tonight. Welcome, happy you're here again. And also to the people at home. I'm Rosalie Dielissen, the program editor, and I have had the privilege of developing this series for the last 2 years in collaboration with Agen, where we dive deep into how technology shapes our democracy. But tonight, on the occasion of International Women's Day, we gather with an even greater sense of urgency. Women's rights are under growing pressure, not just in the US, but right here in Europe. Conversations once thought settled, like access to abortion, are being reopened and scrutinized. Hard-won freedoms are being challenged, and technology is playing a pivotal role in both empowering and sometimes even endangering women. In December, we welcomed Meredith Whittaker, the president of Signal, and one of the few women leading in the tech industry. As program editor, I've made it my mission to bring more women into these critical discussions on technology, because representation is not just important, it's necessary. And that's why I'm so honored to welcome Ida Tin tonight. As a co-founder of Clue, she didn't just create a period tracking app, she pioneered an entirely new space in femtech. Her work has redefined how women manage their reproductive health at a time when understanding and protecting that data has never been more critical. But before we begin with the conversation, I want to start with you, otherwise it wouldn't be Techdenkers. So I'm going to put you right on the spot, I'm so sorry. But I have a few questions. Who uses menstruation apps? Hand up, hand down? Quite a lot of people. May I ask if people use Clue? Okay, interesting. And why are people here? Are people maybe worried what happens to their menstruation data? A few of you? Or are people maybe just curious? Nice. Everyone, well, that's great. Does someone want to share why they're here tonight and what they're curious about? Take your time. You don't have to. But you can, of course. I see a hand.
Sorry. Hi. I'm just curious to hear the conversation, to hear how the company started and what their kind of ultimate ambition is and where they think this kind of space will go.
Thank you so much. Well, without further ado, please welcome Ida Tin. Warm welcome.
Hi.
Hi, thank you so much for joining us. Actually, I want to start with a question because we're here, it's International Women's Day. So I was curious, if we look at the last year, how can women navigate the tech broligarchy that we're living in? It's a very simple first question.
Well, we can build our own technology together with men. We can try to inform ourselves about things that are important to us, like data privacy. We can choose products that are built by people that we trust. We can say when we think something is off. We can say what we want. We can fund women entrepreneurs. Yeah.
Yeah. When you look at the last year, are you worried?
Yeah, I am worried. I think I was worried before, too. But on one hand, I think there's a lot of things going the wrong way, for sure, politically and maybe even culturally. But at the same time, I can see that there are women building technology all over the planet. And I think we are getting used to having technology solve a lot of problems and needs for us. And I think nothing's going to change that. Women are going to keep wanting technology to work for them, and we are more and more building what we need. And I think that is a huge global, strong social movement that is not going to go away.
Okay, well, those are strong words to start the conversation today. Let's start with women building businesses, so your business, 2012. Can you bring me back? So can you bring me back to the moment that you decided Clue needs to happen?
Yeah, it was this question of why has nobody innovated in, I feel I should look at you, but I also want to look at you, so it's kind of, why has nobody innovated in reproductive health and in family planning methods specifically? Since the pill came out in the 50s, and in the history of technology, that's like forever, right? We'd put people on the moon, we had invented the internet, like everything, and still a woman doesn't know what day she can actually become pregnant. And I thought, what if we could sort of work with hormones instead of overruling them and just have this really very, very precise data point of where exactly am I in my cycle, and then we could use that as a type of birth control. And this question and this wanting, I just wanted to take out my phone and I wanted it to say, yes, today you can become pregnant or today you cannot, was such a, in a way, I mean, it's a simple question, right? But at the same time, I knew that could potentially be kind of like a world-changing data point to have, because for women to have agency over how many children they have, for the world to figure out how many people are we going to be on this planet, those are huge, massive, important questions for human mankind to answer. So when nobody had been working this field, I was like, what the fuck? I was like, seriously? Like, how can nobody think this is an important, valuable thing to be putting their attention towards? So I thought, well, the big diagnostics, they must be building this. I better be fast. And this was in 2008. And no, they haven't built it yet. I have seen small startups actually building this. It's possible. But we are still left with this big question of why are the people with muscle mass not really diving in here?
Yeah. And I'm also curious because you started thinking about it in 2008, then you created it in 2012. Those are quite a few years.
So that is true. I had a baby, I started university, I found a couple of co-founders, I moved country, found a guy. Life happened. But we had been working from 11 pretty much full time, and then we founded the company end of 12 and we launched middle of 13. Yeah. It takes time.
And do you think that setting up Clue would be more of a societal kind of move or like a political one for you? What was like the main drive?
I wanted to solve a problem that I had. Like, I wanted a new type of birth control myself, and I had seen enough of the world to know that this is something that many people need, because we need a variety of methods. But there was definitely a sense of sort of gender equality, sort of kind of I don't know, fuel in me. Yeah, for sure. Like a sense of it's a worthy problem to solve, and why is nobody caring enough about this? Yeah, I am angry for sure about many things, and I think many people are, and for good reasons. And I think it's perfectly fine and healthy to use anger to go and create change and express what is not working for us, as long as it doesn't become sort of a block in ourselves, because I think you can also get so angry that you just kind of want to slam the door and not even engage. And that's obviously not so helpful.
Okay, I'm going to take a step back because I want to look at the app itself. Is the app mostly for people who do not want to get pregnant? Is it for birth control, like you just said? Is it to just track my cycle? What are the main elements which are most important?
So we started out building it as a peer tracker because that's what we could do off the bat, while we were trying to build this hardware, which we never succeeded building. That's long stories. But we did end up getting FDA clearance as the world's first 100% data-driven type of birth control in 2021. But we learned that collecting this data set on women's cycles was actually extremely powerful, and there was so many things that we saw that people had questions around and needs around regarding their reproductive health across the lifespan. So the ambition was to kind of help people or take people by the hand and being sort of a companion from their first period or even a little bit before all the way through menopause, and then maybe through a pregnancy or a fertility loss or a fertility problem, or pregnancy loss, sorry, or fertility problem. So I say we, I should also say I don't work at Clue anymore. I'm not even on the board anymore. I stepped off, but I still feel like it's we. It's an amazing team that's there now. But the ambition is definitely moving. As we build something, then we see, oh, but we could also do this and this and this. So the field keeps growing. We're never done. Yeah.
And when did you move off the board of Clue?
Last year, about a year ago.
And why?
So I had been CEO for about a decade, and then I was on the board as chairwoman for a couple of years. And what happened after I stepped off was that my world kind of expanded from being sort of hyper-focused on one company. I got really curious about femtech as an industry and femtech as a part of a larger tech industry, and what is tech even doing in the world, and where are we going as a planet? And I love this sort of zoom out. And even though I care deeply about Clue, I also felt that I, in a way, wanted to be free from my attachment to only one company and be, in a way, more free to think about the industry and the sector. Mm-hmm. I still very much think Clue is doing amazing work, and I want them to succeed, and I'm helping in any way I can. But I should also say there has been amazing CEOs after my time. They have been much better in many ways than I was, and just incredible, and the company's doing really well. So it's all good, yeah.
And you coined the term femtech in 2016. Yeah. Could you explain more what falls under femtech according to you? Is it only feminine technology? Is it like that simple? So in my definition, it's technology that addresses the needs that women have that are specific because of the biology we live in. And when we coined the term, our mind was mostly on reproductive health because that's the space we were in. And I think now we understand that femtech definitely also includes things like bone health or brain health or longevity, things that is definitely part of women's health, or conditions or illnesses where women have very specific set of symptoms. Could be true in cardiovascular health, for instance. And I think it's healthy and good that the definition is expanding. Today somebody asked me, what about sperm quality? You know, fertility is a thing that happens often between a man and a woman, and not always, but sperm is part of the story either way. And often maybe women will purchase these products around sperm quality. Should it be included in femtech or not? I don't know. I mean, I think that's definitely gray zone. Maybe not just for sort of the simplicity of it, but I think it illustrates really well that, well, we are connected to men in many ways, and health is also something that happens between genders. And in the end, we are connected in all ways to men and other genders. So the definition is probably something that's going to keep evolving, but I think for now it's healthy to say, yeah, it is technology that is specific to female biology. And does that, because it's so femtech is so focused on female technology, does it make it more difficult to get investment for it, for instance, or especially maybe even taken seriously? I'm wondering.
Yeah. I mean, yes, that's the sad answer. It is unfortunately the case. I saw some data just last week that was the week before. Even so, most money doesn't go to women in technology, I think you all know, but even in femtech, the number I saw, and there's probably some caveats, but it was only 10% of money in femtech only goes to teams with female founders or mixed teams. So 90% goes to men-only teams building femtech. And again, this doesn't include maybe angel money, family office money, and so let's just call it 20% just to be on the safe side. But they're still obviously not helpful. And in the end, it ends up with inferior products, I believe, because I think women need to be part of building these products, and they need to be part of leading these companies. But yes, it is hard to raise money, and it does not make it easier to be a woman. And if you're raising for products that typically the male investor will not have a use for themselves, it does make the conversations harder. But there is also some light. There are more funds starting that have a specific mandate to invest into women's health. There are accelerators and programs and many people trying to support femtech around the world. And there are many women who also manage to raise funds, but typically at lower valuations and smaller amounts. Again, it makes no sense. We know all the data. We know that women return capital better. We know they're more cash efficient. We know the diverse team perform better. So it makes no sense. So honestly, that's what I come back to with many things in female health. Like, why is nobody building a new type of birth control? It's possibly the biggest use case in all of female health. It just makes no sense. Why are we not raising more capital? It makes no sense. I mean, so much so, if I can add this to,
of course.
that I'm starting a think tank, because it is so simple in a way. If you invest into women's health, you're going to drive the economy, whether it's your personal economy, society's economy, or global economy. We know the data as well, that's a fact. And you're going to end up with a healthier planet in its broadest sense. So there is no good reason not to invest into women's health, and I'm going to try and just make that like something everybody knows.
I talked to Carolina Lukvist from Hormona on Thursday, and she was telling me that she used this example that sometimes she walks to this boardroom, and Hormona is this app where you can track your hormones and see what happens, what's going on with your hormone health. And she says, I walk into these rooms, and what happens is that there are like 6 men in front of me, and they tell me, my wife has really never told me about hormones. She says it's not really an issue, so why would we invest in you? Is that something you really recognize?
Oh, big eye roll. No, I mean, yes, you would sit across the table, or there'll be a person sitting across the table, and he will be like, well, I asked my secretary, my wife, you add any kind of random female person, and she's like, no, she's quite happy on her pill. And I'll just be like, I literally have tens of thousands of emails of people telling me this is valuable. Like, don't use the data point of 1. But I mean, I get it. And I say it with sympathy, because how would they know? Most men don't have a fair chance of knowing what it feels like to have a woman's body.
But why is that?
I don't think... we probably have to first know ourselves, have awareness ourselves, kind of care about our own bodies in a way. I mean, if you get prescribed the pill when you're 16 and that's the end, and like, you know, it takes some sort of engagement, because it's a pretty advanced and complicated system we have, and it keeps changing. So we have to know, and then we have to tell our loved ones, our partners, our doctors, and then we also maybe have to help them listen, because that's then the next thing. Because in these conversations in the pitch room, women will pitch and they will have great stories, but somehow they don't get heard quite the same way as when a guy is pitching. We also know the data in this. Even women don't quite hear women the same way. So there's something about how do we recognize what we think to be a strong leader or an ambitious entrepreneur. And I really want to have some sort of help package for investors, how to invest into female entrepreneurs and into femtech. Like, what do you need to listen to? How do you check your own bias? How do you educate yourself? How do you don't take all these pitch meetings with entrepreneurs so that they can educate you? Do your homework. Come well prepared. Like, there's so many things where I feel something goes wrong in those meetings. And it's always about, like, how can you learn to pitch better, and how do you prepare your numbers better, and how do you tell the visionary story? Sorry, but the people listening, they need to do some training too. They really do. And how would they? I really think they need help. Like, I wrote a guide last week because I was so like, we need to change this. Somebody thought it was a little bit not quite the right tone, so I might have to work on that.
But did you send it to the investors that maybe didn't invest? Or is that too bold?
So investors are social animals for sure. A lot of investment is like, does somebody else say this is cool? And a lot of like following the flock. But they are also rational thinkers. And I think there is some level of like, oh yeah, like femtech, huh? We maybe should look there. So let's help the ones that are curious.
And you just said we need to understand our bodies more.
Yeah.
I'm curious, since 2008, do you see a revolution in that?
Yeah, I think, I mean, technology is amazing because it can also educate, right? And I know that Thank you, everybody who are using Clue. That was really heartwarming. There is a lot of really scientific, sort of valid educational information to find in that app and in many other apps. And I think that is something new. Like, I didn't have an app when I was getting my first period, and all the other things that we experienced for the first time. I think there's still many gaps. Like, for instance, the hormonal health. Like, none of us has longitude hormonal health. We don't have a good sense of what is baseline. When we suddenly, like, things go wanky because we're going into perimenopause, and you're like, what? Like, where is my data set over my hormones for the last 10 years? I would have loved to have had that. And I think in not so long, that's going to be a standard, which is interesting for many things, not only reproductive health.
I want to take a step back to, because we were talking about investments. When you download the app, you have to pay for it now. Was that always the case?
So there's still a free version of the app.
Yeah.
One of the really sort of foundational choices we made at Clue was that we wanted people to pay for the product, because otherwise they are the product. I'm sure you've heard this before, right? Because then it's really expensive to run an app. Maybe people don't know that. I've been trying to write blog posts about that as well. It's really expensive to build apps, and it's expensive to maintain them. And so at some point, there has to be a business model. And for me, it was important to have a really transparent business model so that people understood how we make money. And the way we make money is that you pay for the product. It's really that simple. And we get very used to having free products. I get it. Like, I use free products too. It's nice. But they're never free. Then you pay with your data, or you see ads or something else. And I just felt in reproductive health, there can be no question that your data is safe and honored. And the most transparent and clear way to show that is that you pay for the product. At the same time, we also really wanted people to have access to this, and we wanted people to have access to the education, so we then have a free version, which is probably a little bit bigger than it should be from a business point of view. But yeah.
But do you then pay for with your data if it's a free version?
No.
Or how does that work?
No, you are freewheeling on all the ones that pay for it, basically. And that's probably fine. I mean, I think that's also something to recognize, right? We have users all over the planet, and it is also priced differently in different markets. And we recognize that in some markets, it'll be really hard to make people pay for it. And we're still in these markets because I keep saying I really have to get used to not doing that. Clue is still in the market in these spaces because that's meaningful.
Yeah.
And because you have almost no extra cost to make it free in some more regions, even though even that is not actually entirely true, because you have to translate, and you have to translate everything all the time.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
And the more specific question about data, I want to get back to later, but I'm still wondering, I mean, when, for instance, Meredith Whittaker was here, she kept saying it's so difficult to compete in a market where everything is so free. Yeah. How do you do that? Because, I mean, there's Silicon Valley who says, here are 10 other apps that you can use that are free, and
yeah, it's maybe a little bit like media. Like, I don't know what went wrong with period trackers that they become free from the start. That was definitely, an unlucky start. But some of our biggest competitors, they definitely are very keen on making money. So in a way that helps then everybody to, put a paywall in and say, this is the free part, and if you want premium features, you have to pay for them. And the venture world has also changed. When we started, everybody, it was all about just get many users and we'll figure out making money later. And then pretty suddenly everybody was like, no, figure out how to get to profitability, which was kind of quite a shock in the organization, because you build a very different team if you are just all about growth versus how do we make a sustainable business? And I think it's actually healthy that we build more products that needs to be sustainable businesses. I think that's fine, because there's all kind of things off with the venture capitalistic system. But of course, as a startup, that's, it's a little bit of a reorientation.
And if you would start a new project now or a new business, I don't know if you want to say anything about that, but would you go about it the same way?
No, I would try to build a business sooner, and I would try to not raise venture capital if I could avoid it. And I fully acknowledge that some products you need investments to build. Like, if you want to build a new car, like, good luck doing it bootstrap. You can't, obviously. And a period tracking app is probably on the verge. But there is, I mean, how deep do you want me to go into this? In the end of the day, it's kind of a lifestyle question, like, what life do you want? If you take venture capital, you are on for a very specific type of journey, building that business, because you are trying to build a company that can become $1 billion business. That's the nature of venture capital. But you might just want to build, a company that earns you a living. You have all the freedom in the world. You can do whatever you want. And that's probably great too, So, and I think there is a little bit this lie or kind of glossy kind of myth that it's fancy to raise venture capital. It's not. It just means that some people get to own your business and you sold it at bad terms. That's kind of, I mean.
That also means more opinions, right? More stakeholders?
It means you lose power over time. It's that simple.
But also power over the product itself?
Depends how nasty your investors are, how sweet they are. But I mean, I think we've been very lucky having investors that have both been very patient and kind of sharing a vision. And I cannot complain about our specific investors. In fact, I can't complain over any specific investors. I've only met good people. It's the system that's very broken, where am I going to say this? I'm going to say this. Basically, a bunch of people get money, other people's money, very rich people or rich institutions' money, and it comes with a power mandate that they haven't earned. And they are mandated to have a very extractive mindset. And as founders, you give your life energy. That's what you give. They come with money and power, and it's an unfair power balance, and it's being fully taken advantage of. And there are very few stories. I know them. I know Mark Zuckerberg never had to get crappy terms, but that's the outlier. Okay, most of us will end up losing power in our organizations, and it's just I think it's unlucky, because if you only do things to make money, you will end up at bad places, and that is definitely true in female health.
But devil's advocate, I don't think Musk thinks he's in a bad place right now, politically.
Well, ethically, for sure, I think he is.
That's a different thing.
And I'm also not, but that's a bit the point, right? As a planet, we are on a unhelpful track. It's just, we need to figure out how we build technology that actually works for the planet. And it can also work for investors and founders, but essentially it needs to work for users and it needs to work for our planet. And it sounds so simple, and I don't think it's impossible. I think we can perfectly well build companies that honors people's trust and kind of do the right thing. But you might not grow as fast, and you might not become quite as rich, but maybe that's fine. I think the problem is that you're competing in a system where people get rewarded for being shady or for really only caring about growth at all costs. We need to figure out a system where what we call success is not only money. It has to be a broader definition. And honestly, I feel like our planet is at a point where anybody who allows themselves to put blinds up on themselves and say, no, I became a trillionaire, so I was successful. I'm like, yeah, dude, but the forest is burning and your factory just flooded, and by the way, all your employees are miserable. How can that be called success? It can't. So we need a tech system. Thank you. Yeah. So in that sense, I just feel like the venture capital is a little bit outdated. And it is changing, I think, slowly.
Interesting. Yeah. I think I'm going to move on to the next part of the evening.
Yeah.
I would like to ask Judith Zoe Balie to join us. She's a legal philosopher based in the Netherlands, and her aim is to raise awareness and understanding about the impact of technology. She wants to do so by translating information into narratives in which everyone and anyone can partake. She currently also works as a senior legal consultant at Hooghiemstra and Partners. Warm welcome, please. I would also like to introduce journalist Emma Curvers. She studied philosophy and writes about culture for, among others, the Volkskrant and Volkskrant magazine. And I asked her to write a piece for this particular event. A warm welcome as well.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. So I am Emma Curvers. I started pronouncing it English. Emma Curvers. And I write about social media, tech subjects, emancipation, and some zeitgeisty type of things. So I'm really thrilled to be here today with all of you, especially because it's International Women's Day. I was wondering, did any of you march today? Good for you. Well, great. I felt this year the need for it was felt a bit more strongly. So it feels good to be here. I was recently watching Mrs. America. It's this series about second wave feminism. And I heard these feminists sing, I actually should sing it. They sang, "My eyes have seen the glory and the flame of women's rage, kept smoldering for centuries, now burning in this age." And this afternoon, I kind of felt this smoldering, I saw these older ladies who had been here in the 70s and 80s, and they were back. And maybe it was the fuel that Ida was talking about that I felt today. So that was good. And their husbands even turned up, so that was wonderful. In recent weeks, I've written extensively about ultra-conservatives attempting to chip away at abortion rights, which is something that is, by the way, happening even in the Netherlands, even if everything still seems pretty okay. I've written about tech billionaires suddenly basking in masculine energy and abruptly dismantle diversity policies. And tonight, I'm just delighted to spend time with an audience that shares some of these fascinations, probably particularly the intersection of technology and women's rights. But also, I should confess, I'm hardly a femtech user and mostly a curious consumer, just like you. I had a period pregnancy tracker, but you could argue I'm not very suitable to give this talk at all. You could also argue I'm very, very much suitable because I did not yet spend my money on these apps. I actually wanted to start out somewhere else. There's a major injustice going on in the world of public restrooms. Since about 20 years ago, countless public toilets in airports, zoos, cinemas, and hospitals have been equipped with a specific type of faucet. It's the Dyson Airblade Wash and Dry. So don't worry, I'm not influencing, I'd sooner be de-influencing. It's a faucet shaped sort of like a divining rod, and it dispenses water in the middle and blasts air on the sides, or the other way around, no one really knows. So for reasons beyond my understanding, all these institutions I just mentioned simultaneously thought, this is exactly what we need. And the result of this revolution in hand washing is that in every public restroom, when you're trying to get your hands wet, you're first blasted with this kind of wind force and sound you'd otherwise only experience on like the Afsluitdijk. And afterwards, after you've figured it all out, when you want to dry them, you keep getting drenched. So I just wondered, how can a machine meant to blow suck this badly? And when I looked into how all of this happened, I discovered that in the early 2000s, after inventing the Airblade, Dyson began a secret war against the enormous manual hand-drying lobby. And without you or me realizing it, a pretty intense war took place behind the toilet scenes between Big Dryer and Big Towel. And it was about something as silly as us washing our hands. And I'm not even making this up. Like, an investigative journalist from The Guardian spent months on this topic, the war between Big Dryer and Big Towel. So throughout history, people dried their hands on towels, but Dyson, eager to sell their faucets that cost more than my car, labeled this practice inferior And they published numerous pseudoscientific studies claiming that drying with their deafening noise was far better. So Big Dryer won, and now our hands are wet when they should be dry and dry when they should be wet. But Dyson promises efficiency, hygiene, and individuality. No more dealing with others' dirt. Dyson knows what you need. So you probably can sense I'm heading towards a metaphor here. Many femtech and health mood apps, as far as I can see, are a little bit like these faucets. They offer technology to me, pretending to know what I feel and need. But in the end, they turn out not to improve anything much at all. The philosopher Marshall McLuhan once said that every extension is also an amputation of something else. So the phone was an extension of our voice, but it killed chainmail in the end. And the vibrator is an extension of your finger and made medium Sunday morning sex unnecessary. So maybe that was actually not a good example. But anyway, we're more primed to praise and spend time exploring the good parts of a technological extension because we are always lured by the promise of a nicer future, but we tend to spend a lot less time on the amputation. And then there's the moment when we've smoothly integrated the extension into our lives, and there's actually no turning back because we've invested too much and are already depending on this extension that takes some work out of our hands. And this is the point where it becomes very unattractive to think about exiting. You may be thinking about, a couple weeks ago when everyone was suddenly leaving WhatsApp and they wanted to go to Signal. And now you have Signal and WhatsApp because no one actually wants to leave. So there's always costs when we integrate something new into our lives. But in the case of femtech, I really wonder who's going to tell us what they are. I understand many women around me are happy to use menstrual apps and fertility apps. And I'm kind of concerned that we're selling ourselves a little cheap sometimes, a little too fast. Several years ago, as Ida just mentioned, we collectively realized that if a platform is free, we're the product. And, we were very worried for a while, but this did not lead to any mass exodus on these platforms. We were willing to pay with this information. And some of us were actually quite happy because, I just needed a new vacuum cleaner or whatever. But fertility apps gather infinitely more sensitive information than just browsing for a new couch. I tried my sister's fertility app this afternoon just to see what it was about. She was using a specific one, and I asked her, can I fill it out for you? And I asked her, what was your vaginal discharge like this morning? And she was like, nah, she didn't really want to say whether it was egg whitey or yellow that day. And I was like, if you can't tell your sister, who are you going to trust with that info? She was like, yeah, I don't really know. We don't really know. And these are the most intimate details of our lives. Of course, there are apps that guarantee they have income solely from subscriptions, as we just mentioned, but the cheaper it seems, the more your information is the currency. A privacy researcher analyzed 7 menstrual apps downloaded millions of times and found that nearly all of them automatically shared data with Facebook, despite some of them had repeatedly made promises not to. So women's trust has been repeatedly violated, and there's a reason that we return to a toxic ex. It's because we hope that someone has read these 10,000 words of terms and conditions and probably read them and said that it was okay and is protecting us from our privacy being invaded. Women who are trying not to get pregnant are a goldmine. They get their periods, which is a marketing opportunity. What shocks me is that you actually get chocolate advertisements when you're on your period if you use an app like that. Many people told me. I don't know if any of you had this experience, but I was kind of hoping they would think of something a little less cliched to offer to women who are on their period. By the way, chocolate during menstruation is a cultural thing, and it's not a biological need. So if we would decide right now that from now on, we'll be dancing the Macarena once a month, that would become our thing. We could actually do this tonight. Women who are actually trying to conceive are also very lucrative, and some of them are very motivated and willing to spend a lot on their goals. Apps like Glow offer them a 40% better chance of getting pregnant. I really don't know how they measured that. Recently, I experienced myself that I was pregnant, and then later on, sadly, I wasn't anymore. But social media continued offering me baby carriers and bouncing chairs, and then later on, when my online persona had caught up with the real world, apps were promising me, you can get knocked up again next week if you want. I was like, had no idea how to stop this constant and exhausting bombardment of fertility reminders. But I just deleted the app that tracks whether the embryo is now the size of a bean or the size of a blackberry. And probably just from Googling all this stuff for this talk, I gotten myself into months more of these same adverts. Now, I can only delve into the data of American women for a short bit, but I feel that I must, because in America, where abortion rights are being further and further diminished, femtech that promised to empower them could be used against women. Many privacy experts have warned American women to stop sharing their data or even delete everything they have ever entered into it, because it is very much a possibility that it will be forcibly handed over when they are suspected of a crime like in many states, abortion is. Yet American women also continue to use these apps, and there was even research in February that said that they are increasingly using it, which is a mystery to me. But there's one more reason I haven't really delved into using femtech, and it's because I kind of feel that they throw out a critical responsibility for women, and actually all of us, because they sort of outsource the task of paying attention to myself, I feel, or interpret what's happening with my body. So they encourage trusting an external analysis over personal awareness. And my own awareness is very much more refined. Once years ago, I was quitting antidepressants. Yeah, I'm fine now, thanks. So I interviewed this researcher, and he tracked his mood every day, and he was chronically depressed, sadly. But in the numbers, he could tell when his depression was coming back, even before he himself was aware, like, not feeling so good. He could actually see the numbers, declining. So I was like, oh, I need an app like that. And at that time, it didn't exist. So I made my own Excel sheet for a whole year. I entered all these numbers into it. I never opened it again. I actually opened it just today again and saw these 365 numbers that had no value at all. And the value wasn't in the analysis that would be made of it, but just in me daily making sure of how I felt and how I was doing. I needed to start doing it. So many femtech apps include mood trackers, and they ask you for your mood. And they say, wait, you have just one number for one day? No, there's even apps that add up to 5 sub-moods, and you can add 5 sub-moods to your mood, whatever that is. So there you go. Now you have 5 sub-moods you're supposed to feel, and that sort of sums up to me this sort of greediness that some of these apps have, and also the hopelessness. They're sort of grasping for more information to put into analysis, but it always kind of stops short of the fullness and complexity of human life. So anyway, these were just some thoughts. I can always change my mind, just like anyone here. I just wanted to discuss the Tyson Airblade wash and dry, because this was very much a topic at the top of my mind. And it shows to me that innovation doesn't necessarily have to add significant value to be widely adopted. Just the promise of a more efficient self suffices. And I've learned to remind myself often, nothing is also an option, and there's only one person that needs to know my body as intimately as these apps aspire to, and that's me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emma. I think there are a few things that we're going to talk about and maybe debunk later. For me, that would be mostly is it empowering to use these apps, or is it not, like the double-edged sword it could be, but also what we talked about, how much do you need to know about yourself before using the app, because that's maybe the revolution where we're going to. But before we dive into all that, I want to start with Ida. I'm curious to your reaction, how you listen to this.
I think you raise a lot of really important points. Which is, who can we trust with our data? What can happen with it in a political environment where it might be misused? When do we lose touch with our own bodies if technology gets in the way? But I would say First of all, there will definitely be people collecting data, and if we let it to the people who don't actually care about our bodies to do it, we lose twice. First, we lose out on the good stuff we can do with data, because data is amazing and really powerful, and then we lose out because they do shitty things with it, like sharing too much back to ad networks, which is true, which is happening, which is disappointing. I think it points to this big area of regulation. We definitely need regulation. I think it's very smart as a consumer to choose products that are built in Europe, because they are under GDPR, which is some of the best protection laws in the world. I think, however, that we do need to collect data, because there's a lot of science and a lot of research which need data to actually move female health forward. And we don't only need to know ourselves, we need science to know how our bodies function, so that we can actually get adequate care, so that we can, not wait 10 years to get diagnosed with endometriosis or whatever. I think in some sort of super idealistic world, we might be so in touch with our own bodies that we maybe don't need to use sensors and diagnostics and other things to keep track. But the reality is, first, we're not. And secondly, there's a bunch of things that we don't know. There's a reason we go for a pap smear every year, right? And the same is true when we track things around our cycle. Suddenly we can see, wow, okay, something is off, or we can go and we can show the data to a health provider who's like, okay, you really do bleed a lot. 25% of women have heavy bleeding, more than they have to have. You can do something. Most women don't know. Maybe they get to read it in an app that, or they get an alert. Because I think that was another important point you raised, is it's not enough to collect data. You need to mirror it back, and you need to give it context, and you need to help people analyze it. And we have great tools to do that. One, we have sort of a scientific library of knowledge, but we also have algorithms that can help recognize things. So I mean, technology is amazing and powerful, but of course it needs to be built actually caring about the people it's trying to help. And I think I've gone over that in some details, why there are definitely problems, in kind of systemic problems, why that doesn't always happen. But I think it's really important we don't lose track of the potential and the promise, in a way, of technology. Yeah.
Thanks. Judith, how did you listen to Emma?
I really liked it. It's very close to my last podcast episode that I published today. It's kind of the same, touches a lot of the same things, where I plea for humility in technology, both for the user and the developer. For the user in their own expectations, indeed, what an app can give to them. And I also encourage everyone, if you want to know more about yourself, I think that's wonderful, and I think period apps can really help with that. But I also really encourage everyone to look beyond technology, especially if you have the opportunity that you have access to health care or health providers. And there are great books written about menstruation. There are so many more sources than just period apps. So I encourage people to, if you want to know yourself, there are so many things you can do. And if you do them all, they also really enforce each other. So that's one, I think, so be humble in what one period app can give to you. But at the same time, don't minimize what it can give to you. Like, it can help you in certain ways. And the same, I think, also is true for developers. Like, some period apps promise many things, like taking charge of your own health, or like very, very big promises. And for some people, they might be able to help in that, but for many people, they can't also, which is not a problem. I think it's very important for technological providers, and especially also for like peer trackers, to be very clear of what the limitations are of what they can provide to their users, so that users can make their own decision whether the app is good for them or not, or whether they maybe should look further. So yeah, that were my first thoughts. I have many more, but I'm sure we'll get to them.
Yeah, let's debunk them later, but maybe let's zoom out first. You just talked about your podcast, The Digital Period. Here you interview several people, friends, but also scientists, experts on what maybe a period is, but also how you think about philosophically, how they use their period apps. But I'm also curious to, when did you decide to make this podcast?
Yeah, so I started in 2022, and yeah, basically I was So I'm also a lawyer, and I'm very nerdy. And then the Roe v. Wade was overturned by the Supreme Court, and I was so super interested in what they actually said in their appeal. And I was super worried after actually reading it. I was already worried before, but after reading, I was even more worried because. Not only because of the consequences of the overturning of Roe v. Wade, which obviously meant a defragmentation to the right of abortion in the United States, but also because of the underlying reasoning that really was very anti-liberal. So I felt this, which kind of seems still to be going on, like this anti-liberal movement kind of taking over. And at the same time, I was reading this book, which is called The Vindication of the Rights of Women, which is a book written by a philosopher from the 18th century. Mm-hmm. And she is Mary Wollstonecraft, and she is great. In this book, she is so angry about the fact that women don't have rights and women don't have access to education and information. And many of her arguments still hold up, and kind of these two things made me think, I really need to do more to protect our reproductive rights, to have a wider conversation with many people about what's going on in the world. And I was thinking, okay, how can I have this conversation about autonomy and bodily integrity with as many people as I can? And then I thought, period apps. Like, I use one, so many people I know use one, and I think they're this great getaway to talk about really fundamental philosophical questions, but also very current, like technological topics that maybe are sometimes a little bit made as very complex or difficult, but we all use tech all the time, and tech is also incredibly human. So I wanted to talk about all of these things in a way that is accessible, and that became my podcast in the end.
Mm-hmm. And I'm curious because, the word political has fallen a few times tonight, and also Emma has raised it, and you've raised it. I'm curious, do you think that because our uteruses have become more political, the apps have become more political, or the reasoning behind it?
Well, uteruses have always been political, I'm afraid, but. No.
No. I mean, I agree. I mean, also when you read Mary Wollstonecraft's book, it's so current, which is very worrying, of course. But like the female body in general has always been super political, and yeah. I don't think I hope we get to a time where maybe we can keep our rights and keep our autonomy safeguarded for a very long time, but so far it seems that it will remain political for a while.
Yeah.
Maybe I can just say that I think one of the reasons maybe that the really big tech companies are not actually doing women's health is because it is very hard to not have it be political. Like you mentioned, like how big is the baby? Is it the size of a fruit or whatever? When Clue built the app, we spend so much time thinking about like how do you talk to people if it's not a great thing that they're pregnant? How do you talk to people about pregnancy loss? Like it's so sensitive, and no matter what you do, you're gonna have to take a stance. How do you inform people about abortion? And we were fine doing that. But if you are a Microsoft, that gets really complicated.
How did you do that? How did you talk to people?
We are clear, and we're like, yeah, people should have right to abortion. Yeah. Like we think that's.
But I mean,
fine.
What wording did you use? Did you use the fruits? Did you?
No, we didn't. We didn't. There are no fruits. I think that's one of the reasons why you need to have diverse teams, right? You need to have people who feel this on their own bodies as they build this technology. Like, what does it? It's like no, like don't talk down to me. Don't make it like be silly or like, and having lots and lots of conversations with users, and try to avoid some of the sort of cliches. Yeah, I want to say one thing about. How much power there is in making data available to science, because I agree, like we can try and have the agency, but we really need this sort of societal level of moving female health forward. And I also want to just say that now we talk a lot about period apps for good reasons, but femtech is also new robotics and ultrasound equipment, so for finding endometriosis, or it's a new protocol for osteoporosis, or it is how do we diagnose breast cancer in urine, how do we have sex toys with sensors so we can recognize patterns for people who have vaginal pain. Like, it's a lot of things. I think just want to keep that as like an overarch as we have this conversation, that femtech is many, many things, and it keeps finding these spots in female health where something is just not good enough. Maybe it's the tools that the gynecologists use that is, were developed for taking out metal of soldiers. Like, and female health is full of areas where, wow, can't we do better? And all of these areas can be connected to sort of a data set that's kind of missing and that we really need. And some of the work that I'm quite proud of Clue having done and still do is all the science partnerships we do with really great universities where we don't sell the data, but we share de-anonymized data because people come to us, and because the textbooks were written on data that often had really small data samples and often mostly white college students. And now we have this incredible diverse data set. So we actually need to rewrite a lot of the old textbooks. There's also a lot of really great modern books about periods, but just also one thing to keep in mind, a lot of the medication we take was not tested in women. So we really need this almost like base level rebuild of understanding female health, and technology is such a superpower to collect those data sets.
But how did that work? So you decided that you wanted to share the data of Clue with researchers, right, in universities?
Yeah, so also on the note on the 30-page terms of use that nobody reads, we really tried to make it actually readable. We wrote blog posts about like educating people why they should read it. We tried to tell people what happens with your data when you share it. But so we have one of the largest data set on the women's cycle in the world, and researchers come to us and they say, oh, we would love to understand how, I think it was MIT who did a study on how does pollution affect the female cycle. And we think, yeah, that would actually be really cool to know exactly what data do you need, and this is something we've spent resources on, package that data so they only get the relevant data set, because that was another point you raised, like, what data do we share to our apps? Do they have good reasons for getting this information, and what can we give back? So we do the same with the scientists.
Is it like a process you have, or how does that work? Is there a third party involved, or?
Yeah, so we have people employed at Clue who have these conversations with the scientists and make sure that it's credible research and that the data they get. And this is something we have also been very transparent about to our users and ask them, like, do you want this? You can opt out. But many people find this is helpful because there's something, I think, quite incredible about the fact that every time you enter a data point, you are actually almost physically moving female health research forward. And a lot of people say, yeah, like, maybe one day when I go to the doctor, they will understand better my body because I share this data. And then just one final loop on that. We also try to then, when the research then actually learns something new, because they do, then we at Clue would rewrite it in a way that would be accessible to our user base and say, this is what we've learned, so that the loop is complete. The people who actually gave the data learned what we learned, or what the scientists learned.
Yeah. So basically, this is why you gave your data, this is the research that we did, and these are the results.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Judith, in your podcast, you talked about, in one of the episodes, someone talks about the Flow app, and that in 2022 there was this whole class action in the US where people, where they deemed that they were sharing information, they as in Flow, with Facebook and Google, because they didn't have 30 pages, but 100 pages of information that you had to click on. Well, I was curious to how do you listen to that? How do you understand that? Well, not understand, but do you recognize that why that may be a problem?
Yeah, obviously, yeah. Especially because also Flow talks a lot about giving control to their users. So of course it's very odd if you build this the surface that promises control over one part of your area of your life, that there are other parts where you give zero control or even lie about the control the user has. The data you put in a period app as flow is extremely sensitive data. And it can tell so much about a person. And is also, as we just discussed, it's also political data. It depends also on the context, how it can be used or misused. So it needs to be protected. And if you promise to users to give them control over their life, it's very ironic that at the same time you're selling their data to Meta to provide them ads. It's completely contradictory also to what a user should be able to expect from such a service. Yeah.
It's illegal.
And it's illegal.
It's unethical.
Yeah.
It's illegal.
Yeah.
And it's super sort of bad business practice. And it's disappointing that they get rewarded, because that's also the fact, right? That
How do you mean rewarded?
so the valuation, how much money they raise, the growth they get, because what they did was that they share very sensitive, so can I?
Go ahead.
So the way it works is that you do an ad, and if it ends up with a user installing your app, then you say, oh, that kind of user was successful, so let me try and find more people that look like this user. And of course, the more you know about people, the more you know if that will be a user that fits. So if you add more data back to the ad network, like did they just look like they had a miscarriage, you can target them very precisely. Now this is against what they wrote, against what they said to users what they would do. You're a lawyer, so you can probably explain this even better. And somebody saw that and be like, hey, that's not right, and they had this lawsuit. But they got a lot of growth, and the way that these algorithms work is that once you are kind of big, it's kind of a snowball effect. More people will find you in the app stores, and then you have money, you can buy ads. So when somebody Google or they search for Clue in the app store, Flow pops up at the top. And you have to be a pretty informed consumer to recognize this and kind of be like, no, let me see what else. And so you get huge growth, and it's so difficult for a consumer to navigate this. Who can I trust? Where does the data go? And if you have companies like Flow who deliberately look like they are built in England, when in fact they're built in Belarus, which is outside the urine protection area, or you have apps that look like they're American, but they're actually Chinese, you are not well protected. And I wish there was
And not well informed, maybe.
Sorry?
And not well informed if they look like another country.
Right. So maybe you could imagine we could have some sort of good data practice stamp, like we have. You look like that's an idea you would like to, maybe, or I don't know, but like we have bio food, and it has a stamp, and we kind of trust at least halfway that this is, biologically okay, but we don't have that in consumer apps.
Yeah, no, I think that would be great.
Yeah.
Also because now, as a consumer, you're very dependent on what the app is telling you, even though you don't know what's going on behind the app, so you can check their promises at all. There are some things that you can do as a user. So for instance, indeed, like the place they're based is a really important data point that, at least in the App Store, like the Apple App Store, is visible. So I would always encourage people to choose an app that is within the EU. And there are more things you can do. There are also different organizations that check the privacy of many different apps. Like Mozilla did a quite large review of most apps in 2022. They were quite positive about Clue.
Yes, but even Privacy International made a lot of mistakes about Clue, and it was actually super frustrating. But in principle,
Mozilla,
yes.
But Mozilla was quite. I checked today to double check, and they were pretty good. So don't worry. Only some cybersecurity things that not my expertise. But they also checked other apps. So that's something that, and I also think they wrote it very accessible. So I would encourage everyone to take a look there. And also what we said earlier, indeed, sometimes when you don't pay, it's often that you're the product, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. You also have non-profit developers who develop period apps that are quite good. Like in my podcast, I had Drip, but I also had Oki, which was developed by UNICEF specifically for young girls, which I thought was an amazing period app as well. So there are definitely options, but it requires quite a lot of work from the user. And it's also, and maybe that's more important to say, even though as a user, these things are things you can do, it shouldn't be the responsibility of users. We have regulations that are often not upheld. And also regulation is one thing, but there also needs to be enforcement.
Is it because it's unclear who needs to uphold the regulations?
No, I don't think so. I think probably it's partially a capacity problem from data protection authorities.
European Commission.
Yeah, so for data protection, it would be the national data protection authorities, and every country organizes a little bit differently. I think in Germany you have also regional data protection authorities.
Strictest ones in Berlin. Not kidding.
Yeah, so I would say that it would be up to them. And then you also have, it's also different per country, but you have like the Nederlands Gezondheidsinstituut or the Gezondheidsautoriteit. You have like also national health authorities that I think should also really be involved when it comes to technology that's relating to health. So yeah, enforcement I think is the other side of the coin that's really important here.
And conversations about ethics in
Yeah,
technology
definitely.
and having, because at the end of the day, you know, the founders or the leaders, they make decisions. They also make decisions about the norms and the culture they, you know, put forward. And sorry to keep talking about flow here, but they have some really bad examples of some really gender normative content where I'm
They
just
do.
like, oh, like,
What is an
100
example?
million, like how to make your vagina smell better. By the way, I think they meant vulva, but they said vagina. And it's just like, oh, you just cringe and you think, how many people are going to sit there and you know, where it's like hurtful, harmful, when it should be the
Definitely.
opposite. Again, one of the reasons why I have some women on the teams who like, actually, maybe not this one. Yeah.
Yeah.
But let's fantasize about that stamp, right? Because you said we need a stamp. Who would give that stamp? Would that be a national authority? Would that be a European authority? Do we need more European authority?
Yeah, I think yes, and I think it needs to be at least pan-European, because one of the challenges is also all these kind of national differences. I mean, just the fact that we have FDA in the US for medical, you know, stuff, and then we have the European system is not conducive for innovation. That's a little bit maybe a separate conversation, but I mean, I love your hands on sort of this is what you can do as a consumer, and I think you're right. Like, just the fact, if you look at a website and they don't tell you where they're based, that should be a red flag. If they don't tell you how they make money, that should be a flag. If they have no women being part of building technology for women, that should be a flag. By the way, it should be so much a flag for investors. They're just like, great idea, come back when you have a female co-founder. I'll just make it like, it's a no-go.
Yeah, in general, if you go to the website and you can't find any faces or like names behind the company, that's not a good sign, I would say.
If they copy the vision statement from another competitor, also not a great sign, just saying.
And how do you look at what Ida just said about the European Union taking more responsibility as a lawyer?
Yeah, so I'm thinking about the stamp. I think a lot of, I have a lot of thoughts about it. I think the danger is that there would be like one moment, and then obviously it would always be a moment where a stamp gets received. I don't know what the best way is, but I think it would definitely be better if the enforcement was clear and communicated also to the user, so that if there is a period app under research by an authority, that is clear. And now I don't know. Like, I don't think it's clear at all when a research starts or when there is like extensive research on whether legal practices are correct. And also the outcomes are not really widely communicated. I think Flow is a good example. The fact that also I don't know the correct English word, but like they were under research but at the end
Under investigation?
Het was geseponeerd. Like
the post?
The post, I don't know what it was settled. Like there wasn't. So at the end.
So it didn't become a trial.
No, and it didn't become completely transparent of what exactly was done by Flow because of this.
So they had to write an email to their users saying, "Oops, sorry, we did something we shouldn't have done." But honestly, like, they should have been forced to do a pop-up in the app. Right? That's sometimes where I think that's a sweet example of where regulators and the tech world is just like not on par. Like, if somebody told me I had to send an email to all my users and tell them that I fucked up, we're like, okay, I know that only like 30% are gonna open that email.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's a pop-up, I'm like, oh shit, they're gonna just delete the app. It's a huge difference.
So the
I don't know if regulators knew
penalty
that.
should be much harsher, you're saying?
It's just depending on what the crime is, but I mean, yeah, it has to matter, right? It has to be enforced.
It should be matter, yeah.
Because and honestly, as a competitor, you're like, fuck, right?
Yeah,
because here
like,
we are, we know that you don't get, sorry.
No, I can imagine like it impacts the trust of the entire femtech sector.
Yes.
Must be very difficult. Yeah.
Yes, but also like, I know that my ads are going to be twice as expensive as their ad because I don't do that shit.
Yeah.
Right? And then you fast forward 10 years and they become $1 billion company and I'm not. I'm like, what happened? I mean,
Yeah.
but it's just to say it actually really does matter and the enforcement of course matters. But the biggest problem, I mean, honestly, whoever becomes a billionaire or a trillionaire, it doesn't really, like, that's a problem in itself. I'm not at risk, by the way, don't worry. But the problem is that in the end, you get a product that is just not as good as it could have been had they somehow not been rewarded by being shady and growing at all cost. By the way, I have met one of the founders personally, because he was like, hey, you're in Cyprus, we should meet. I'm like, okay. And the first thing he says is like, I have a lot of respect for what you built. And I'm just like, yeah, you are a great executor. You really are. You know how to build apps really fast, but I don't have a lot of respect. You know?
And how did he respond?
He asked me if I could maybe advise one of his portfolio companies.
But you did that for Google as well, right?
I don't know. Oh, you're for Apple?
Yeah, for Apple, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, that was funny. So Apple came out with the health app where you can literally track everything about your body except periods, which they forgot. And I mean, we're laughing, but it's wild, right? How did they forget? Maybe because they don't have so many periods. I don't know. But so they reached out and like, hey, can you guys give us a couple of pointers? We did. It's a okay period tracking app they have, but it's not great. It's just not great.
Yeah. And one of the other things I think maybe that's also interesting to touch upon, which you also mentioned, is why do people keep using these apps even though they sell our data, like Flow? And I think the cruel thing about this is that especially when people have a lack of access to health education, the importance of these apps grows. So it becomes this very impossible choice for a user where they either have no access to health information at all or very little, or maybe access to something but that kind of abuses them as a product. So there is like a reason why people keep using it. It's not because they are completely unaware that the fact that their privacy might not be protected, but because there are maybe other more important things at stake for the individual, and that's what makes it really bad. And especially when it comes to health, you want to have this basic minimum that as a user you can trust that the regulations are upheld and that your privacy is protected. And I hope we can move towards that.
That's interesting what you're saying, because it's also a question I still want to ask tonight is that double-edged sword we're talking about, that autonomy and dependency. I mean, I see you wearing an Aura ring, I think. I'm wearing a Fitbit. And what you're saying is, for me personally, is I keep thinking, okay, I really want to know what's happening with my body and with my sleep. I don't track my menstrual cycle, but I do want to know more about me and my steps, for instance. But at the same time, I'm very aware that I don't know what's happening with my data, and when I'm tired, I get more sugary ads and that kind of stuff. So I'm curious to how you guys look at that double-edged sword. Do we become more dependent on technology because of it, or do we become more autonomous because of it?
It's a little bit like medication, right? We want the right medication and we want to take it at the right time, but we don't want to be addicted to it and we don't want it to make us sick. I mean, we need technology that is built well with people who actually care. And I think there is a healthy way to use technology? I think so. And I think it's...
What is a healthy way then?
I think something like longitude data, I think it's going to be something we consider like a life insurance in the future. I think it's very powerful and helpful to understand what is changing, what is normal, and suddenly something is off. Normal, your normal, understanding the, and normal versus your normal. And again, these are the kind of really refined kind of product. Like that's part of building a really great product, is that you help people understand that nuance, for instance. But also, like, we have technology for finding a movie we might like, or getting food. We are going through crazy, wild things with our body. It's hard to have a women's body. We go through trying to get pregnant, trying not to get pregnant, giving birth, breastfeeding, cysts, and I don't know, the list is endless. Everybody has a story. Why on earth would we not use technology to help us?
I do think that technological dependency is a big risk, also with tracking apps. I do see that often tracking apps keep asking you to put in more data in general, and I think it would be a great evolution or development if there are also more apps that try to increase self-awareness by tracking and also share the insights by tracking a certain thing, but at the same time also give tips to the user, maybe how to become aware of it without using the phone all the time, or like have a goal that you can set a goal where you want to be like, I want to organize my life in such a way that I maybe have 2,000 steps every day. Can you help me? And at some point, I want to have this so part of my system that I don't need to check whether this is correct every day or every week. I think that would be a really good route for many of the tracking apps. And I don't see that as much now. I think now they're often built as something that you need to continuously keep using. And I think that's really a big, I think they're very, also for me, like they have really helped me to become more aware of my own body, but also because of this project, I became very aware of it, and also very aware of that I wanted to use technology less because I don't need it anymore, which is a great help. And thanks to tracking, I got there.
So you got to know your body more and now don't need it anymore.
Exactly. And I think that is, I don't think it's always possible, but I think definitely it's one of the things that users should think about, whether it's possible for them and what it means. And it might mean, there are a lot of things you can do to stop using it all the time because might not be necessary.
How do you listen to that?
I mean, it's a little bit counter to what we have seen in people's sort of experience, because a lot of people actually included a really big survey. I hope it was good too, but a really big survey, I think 2 years ago. And many people just don't feel well. They are concerned. They have concerns like this: am I healthy? Am I okay? What's going on? And I wish there would be a point where they're like, I have no concerns. But our body also keeps changing, right? And so suddenly something hits you or something is up. And I don't know, it's... I mean, I like the sentiment. I also don't want to be dependent on an app. And if you look at sort of the baby care, I'm horrified. Like, just feel your baby. Like, I really get the sentiment. But at the same time, I'm like, the reality I see is, again, people deal with endometriosis. They don't know they have it because their mom had it. And the mom is like, yeah, it hurts. Like, they both don't know. Like, no, you should not have to lie in fetal position 2 days per cycle in pain. Go get help. Or, as I mentioned before, you shouldn't bleed like crazy. Or your mood is all over the place. Or suddenly you go into, like, one of the things people are seeing now is that you probably start having perimenopausal symptoms way earlier than we thought. It affects mental health. I just think there's so many things we don't really know yet. And what does it do now? We all have microplastics in our brain. And I mean, when are we ever gonna not keep track? I don't know. But again, you should never give more data than what is needed and what you get something meaningful back from. Like, if an app asks you to track 1 billion things and you don't really feel that they give you something back, like, that's like...
But should the app then not ask 1 billion things?
No, they should not. I mean, at Clue, we did not build a backend in the beginning because we didn't feel we could do it safely. So there was a bunch of things where we're like, we don't have a good reason to ask for this data.
What would be an example of that?
I mean, there were things around, something like mood, for instance. like, as you mentioned, right? Unless you can actually, analyze it in a way that it becomes a meaningful insight, or there is enough content that you can start recognizing something. I don't know, but I mean, for instance, the first time Trump won, we could see that was the day the most people ever said that they were sad in our user base. Is that potentially an interesting data point for some social scientists? I don't know. I mean, I'm sort of caught between, like, I do really understand your sentiment, but there's still so many things we don't understand, even about our own bodies, but definitely in populations. And then populations change and we change as individuals. I don't know when we don't need to learn more. I don't know, I haven't seen it.
I think there's a difference when you look at it on the individual level and on the collective level. Mm-hmm. Like collectively, I completely agree with your point that you made earlier as well, that it's important that we collect more accurate data, especially about women, regarding their health for many, many different reasons. But I think for the individual level, I think also the relation between not only the technology, but the access to an actual health care provider is very important here, because you don't want someone to just track their problem. You want to go to a solution. And of course, this is tied to the collective level, where we need also to have enough science and data to understand the problems people are having. So these things are a bit tied. But I think on the individual level, preferably, especially when there's a problem, you want to move towards a solution or like a progression in your life. You don't want to track the same thing all the time.
But having the data and be like, hey, doctor, look, and they go, oh, yeah, you really do, whatever, have a lot of short cycles or something. Because people get gaslighted all the time in the medical world. And we see that people can take more agency or have more agency and take more action when they have the data to show, because somebody can see them as proof, kind of, which is kind of crazy.
No, I completely, also it's my personal story. It's also one of the reasons I started this project is because I have chronic migraines and I track them. And I also tracked my hormonal cycle, because my doctors would say, oh, it's probably your hormones, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't think that was the case. So for me, collecting data about both my migraines and my hormonal cycle together, and then showing it to my doctor made a big change. I now have great medication, and I still have chronic migraines, but I don't have the pain anymore. So that's wonderful. So I completely agree. But I think this is exactly kind of what I try to say, is that it's nice to be able to diagnose your problem, but then also to be able to be in a position where you can go to someone for a solution, so that I don't track my migraines anymore, because it's not necessary, and because I found a solution, and also because I was able to prove I have this thing, and the data really helped me. And I think for most situations, I think that would be kind of the ideal situation where we want to go to.
Yeah, so you're saying, I think I hear you both saying yes to technology, but on individual and collective level, and you're also saying yes to technology and more. So maybe to end on a positive note before we go to the audience, what is something that you would change now, this minute, today, for female health? One thing.
I would love to see more women building technology that they need. Every time you meet a problem or encounter something, feel that you are able, empowered, allowed to say, yeah, I could build a company to fix this, even if it's something really big and difficult. Because you can.
For female health, I think one of the sources of the problems really is the funding structures. You mentioned it in the beginning, and I would love to see way more money also to like academic hospitals to be able to work together with technology companies. I think this is something that's not been done so much.
From the government or from?
It could be from the government or the European Commission. I thought
that
about
doesn't
it
matter.
30 seconds. But I think that is like, because I do think in research there is such a wide gap, and that really needs to be addressed, but it also needs to be addressed from a place of we care about people's health, and we have healthcare system, and if we can like bring innovation from the more tech sector to the more traditional healthcare system in a more sustainable way, where they're also not dependent on, like you said, like quite toxic funding structures, I think that would be great. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
A good time to go to the audience. Does anyone have a question? It's fine. I'll go.
Hey, Ida, I have a question for you. I'm wondering, is it correct that you're saying that in Clue you're also giving basically birth control predictions to users? Did I understand that correctly?
That's a bit of a longer story. We got the clearance, we launched the product, and then we also wanted to take the time to make sure that we can adjust the product so that it's, you launch something, you tweak it, you launch it again. But because it's a regulated product, you would have to go through a big, not the whole, but a pretty big chunk of the process to even change just one screen on the onboarding. It was literally one screen that filled it out too many people. And we really had to figure out to build features that could earn us money, because that was exactly when that shift happened, where the investors and the market was hard to, we couldn't raise money, and the investors were like, you got to figure out to make more money. And this was a product where I was like, it has to be good. We have to get this right. Like, we can't, it's not one where it's like, it just have to be like good enough. It had to be really good. So it got put in the drawer, and it's still lying in the drawer, and it hurts my heart, because I think it has a lot of potential. But so it's not in the product. Oh.
Well, I have a follow-up question, because I'm very curious, because I think we talked a lot about data and about data points, and I'm assuming you're building models to predict when women are fertile or not, to be able to give them recommendations on it. But your recommendations will depend on the input that your users give you, which needs some form of education, because if they do not give you valuable input, the predictions will be wrong.
Yeah.
How do you see your responsibility as Clue in making sure that your users understand how to use this app in a careful way, that they will actually get predictions which will not get them pregnant?
Yeah. So this was actually one of the core things we had to show to get regulatory clearance. And think about it a little bit like a digital prescription thing. And we had to prove that even the most hungover lady would do this right. And we had to show that it would work with a diverse group of people in America. And we did it maybe a little bit too well, so we filtered out like a little bit too many. But that was actually the hardest thing. And we had to have 100% test rate. So everybody we put this in front of had to get it right. But it also turns out that having people enter the first day of their cycle, and you combine that with a global data set and a bunch of math, actually is good enough. And then the question is, how long a period of time do you say don't have unprotected sex, or you're at risk? And of course, the more data you have on an individual, the more regular they are, the smaller the window you can make, and then it's a better product to use. Because otherwise you can just say 100% of the days are at risk, and you have you're 100% successful, but that wouldn't be a product anybody would use. There was a clinical trial that was done for 2 years, that was done by a university, that we then took over and took through regulatory approval. But does that answer your question? No. Sure. So your question is, will people do this well enough to trust the data?
Well, my question was
Wait.
About how do you see your responsibility?
You're not understandable.
Yes, I feel super responsible.
So how will you educate your users how to basically use your app responsibly? That was my question.
Really long onboarding, lots of onboarding slides. Yeah, and also you can only use it if your period is not crazy regular. You cannot use it if you're under 18, if you're over, I think it was 40 or 42, like a bunch of things. That's kind of the prescription part. It's not for everybody on the planet. It's for, do you fit? Yes, you fit. Okay, and also here is how you do it and use it.
Thank you. Another question?
I actually have two questions. One is very short and straightforward, and it's to Ida. So as you said, like you give the data to the researchers. I wanted to know if at any point, did you add any data point because they were needed for a particular research maybe that you miss at a point of the data that would be like beneficial?
No, we didn't. And there always has to be a good reason for users to share data. And doing a research project would then have to be like, hey, we want to do this research project. Do you want to participate? And that's what we've done several times. That was the good one that was supposed to, the one we did recently. And lots of people want to participate. It's amazing. And it's super incredible data. Like, you get an incredible data set that as a researcher would have been literally impossible to get. But not as part of the core product. The core product has to solve problems for people that are relevant to them and not a science question.
Thank you. And my second question, I really love the discussion here, but the points I was a little bit missing. I would like to know more about the cybersecurity, and if as you were part of the Clue, how much of the cyber attacks did you experience, and how much those that are under the threat? And also, I would also like to hear about the usage of AI. It's now a hot topic now, but a lot of people are actually turning to ChatGPT to ask for their medical advice. So I just also want to know if you kind of think about utilize it, but also what do you think about it in general?
So in terms of data security, we've never had a data breach. So all the data which is about what's happening in your cycle is completely separate. It's like a different silo from the data that can identify you. I do think about sort of data security. I remember it was something I brought up with the board when the Ukraine was invaded. I was like, should we be more aware about cybersecurity in the future? They kind of said, we have bigger things or more urgent things to think about. Like, nobody was alarmed. But I think that is something to think about as you build technology. And what was your second question?
AI.
The AI. Yeah, for sure. I mean, we are not an AI company, but we use AI. I think that's how to think about it. It's an amazing tool, and we, of course, want to know how to use the tools as they become available. This is where I really feel you must ask people who are working at Clue, because I should not and cannot talk in a lot of detail to what is currently being decided at Clue. I just don't have the information. But that's my strong conviction that they're thinking about AI and how to use it well. Yeah.
Another question?
Hi. So first of all, thank you so much. I have a question for Ida, and I'm a founder myself, Kasia at Mamamoon. So also founder in femtech, and actually my question is, how the hell do you stay sane? Because I kind of calculated, like your 2008 would be my 2019 year. Your 2012 is like 2022. We are now in 2025, and I had investors telling me, you have to mail up. I had all those talks. I had to change the narrative. And it's just, I've built a product based on the pain that I lived through. I see women using the product, and I see the value that it's bringing. But it's sometimes just so hard, to keep on going against all of, let's say, the 10%, the 2%, the whatever percent, which is just, Any tips on staying sane other than just counting to 10, please?
Entrepreneurship is not for everybody. That's another kind of glossy lie that is like a career choice. Like, if you don't, if there's not something burning in you, maybe don't do it.
No,
but
I mean, absolutely love it.
Yes,
so
that's the thing. We love it, right? But a lot of body work, like body therapy, has been really helpful. I don't know. I mean, talk to people around you, try to get support, find people who can help. Also remember, it is not the end of the world. Sometimes it feels like it. If we fail, we can try again. But I think it's good to recognize that it is hard. No. It is really hard. And if you have a great kind of personal life, then good for you. That would make it easier. Yeah, I don't have a better answer. But to take care of yourself, sometimes I see people where they fight too long. I was like, you know what? Just stop. Don't keep going. Do something else. And then I can try and help and pave the way and make more money flow your way. I would love that because I know it's not fair and it makes no sense. Maybe the best advice I can say, it's not you. You have tried to pitch 1 billion times and you think, is it something with me? No, it's not. You're doing well. Keep going. It's the system. It's broken.
Yeah. Another question.
Hi, I have a question for both of you. So I'll start with Judith. Judith? I'm curious, going back to the topic of AI, what you see as the legal, philosophical, ethical implications of AI when it comes to femtech, especially considering the political climate. And Ida, I'm curious about like the broader spectrum of femtech outside of menstruation trackers, like you mentioned earlier. I'd love to hear you talk about what else you're excited about or what you're seeing on the landscape.
Judith, you start?
In relation to AI, so as a technology, I think there are a lot of great things that might happen with AI, especially within healthcare. I do think one of the dangers is that AI often is made in a context that's very connected to very large powers, so I think that any technology cannot exist outside of our actual world. So who makes it, which is also why it's important that women are involved when working on female health, but also when it comes to AI, it is important who is behind the AI for how AI will look like. And if I look at the AI landscape now, there are basically 3-4 big companies behind a lot of the inventions that I think are politically very far removed, at least from my own personal values. So I expect a lot of problems coming out of there. And another problem, which is not necessarily related to the political landscape, but what I also think could be in danger, is that I think AI now is very good at making it seem that as a person, you're talking to a person, even though that's not true. And I think also in relation to female health, it is very important that we make sure that we have good access to healthcare, to actual health professionals, and not necessarily that gets replaced by an AI system, which is not a person who doesn't have a capacity of understanding and doesn't have a medical degree. So those are two things that come to my mind.
There was a question for you. What is on the horizon? What are you excited about?
Yeah. I'm excited about the technology itself and innovation and people building great products, but I'm also really excited about the cultural kind of expansion. Thank you so much for being part of that, really, and all of you for being here. Without you, there would be no event. I'm curious about things that can look at the body at a sort of molecular level. I think that's interesting. I think, as I mentioned before, I think hormonal health will be a really big space. I'm excited to see that menopause is being addressed a little bit better. I'm not surprised it's happening, but I'm happy it is, and I think we're still at the tip of the iceberg. There's a bunch of chronic diseases that are not well understood or managed or diagnosed: PCOS, endometriosis, cysts, fibroids. I think sort of things we can do at home is powerful. Home diagnostics, and also access. I mean, I hear you about the sort of like human touch, but sometimes the human touch is not that great in women's health because the touch is like a little bit insensitive or kind of blind. Again, it's like there is this potential that, you know, you could speak to an amazing AI that actually gives you the information you need, and it is actually taking enough data in to process what's actually going on versus just sort of brushing you off. as a doctor, might do. I also know that our healthcare system is under so much pressure, and there's just a looming bomb. Healthcare systems are not going to be able to keep performing as they are. So somehow, technology is going to have to play a role. I have a friend in London. She's a gynecologist. She's like, yeah, there's a year waiting time to see a gynecologist. I'm just like, what? But that doesn't work. How can you you can't walk around with something for a year. That's broken. So I hope that we can build things that can make these journeys better.
And concretely, what is your next focus? Do you want to say?
The think tank, because I think we have this really big systemic problem that people just don't put enough money, research, and attention on female health, even though we know that it will drive lots of good things. So I would, and sometimes I have these mind sort of bending conversations. I'll sit with, people who sit and they will give out €250 million every year for breakthrough innovation, or with the German investment bank who gives out, I don't even know, it's $1 billion a year, so much money. And then I speak to the female entrepreneurs and they're like, I cannot find the money. I'm just like, how can this not meet? It's like lost in translation, and I hope I can somehow be some sort of magnet that can make things come together a little bit, because there is money out there. Look at the money available to invest into AI. No shortage. Actually, that's not entirely true on a societal level. Europe needs to totally get into the game. Separate conversation, but still.
Thank you so much. I think we're going to round it off here. I'm sorry. Because in about 5 to 10 minutes, there's going to be a little after party in the Balie with, I'm very biased, but a great cocktail. So I really want to thank you. I also want to thank Emma. And I'll see you next time with Techdenkers.
Thank you.